showcase the work of one of our recently minted students. I'm sitting in Needham, Massachusetts, and looking forward to talking with you about this very interesting new component of Jewish education.
Thank you. Okay. Who else do we have here with us? Harvey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Harvey Rabin. I'm from Austin, Texas. Conservative Congregation Education Director there, and glad to be part of this.
Is that Gudas Achim?
It is.
Okay, I spent a short time there when I did a little sabbatical in Austin. How about the Wernick?
Hi, I'm Shoshana.
And I'm Rabbi Wernick, Sandy's rabbi. And we're
welcome. Welcome. Thanks for coming. Eileen, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Eileen Beckman. I'm the religious school director at Temple Emmanuel in Newton, Massachusetts.
Great, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. Okay, I know we have some other attendees who might be joining us, but let me say a couple of words first about Hebrew College and about Sandy, and then we can get started. And as people join us, they're welcome to hop on in. Hebrew College, as I mentioned, Hebrew College is Sandy's alma mater now. She just graduated just 2 weeks ago with her master's in Jewish education. The master's in Jewish education at Hebrew College is a thriving program. It exists heavily online. We have students who come to our campus in Newton, but for the most part, our students are all over the country and, in fact, all over the world studying for their master's in Jewish education, also their certificates. And we have an incredible class community that's built in that online forum with faculty also all over the world coming in from Israel and from West Virginia, all over the country. And we have students piping in from London, Hong Kong, Canada, Israel, Alaska. So it's really an international conversation about Jewish education and the deep connections that our students are feeling to one another and to their faculty and to the subject matter about which they are so passionate is really coming to life online. Sandy's, we were lucky to get Sandy about halfway through her career at Hebrew College because she had started another program at a similar institution which was struggling and closed. And Sandy, luckily, by Kismet, found us, and we were lucky to get her for the anchor part of her career. We have other students who are doing a 36-credit master's, and in particular right now, we're recruiting for our third class of legacy fellows. And these legacy fellows get a substantial amount of funding, over half of their tuition paid, and have an annual conference, and again are part of that online community that we're really proud to have built at Hebrew College. Of course, Hebrew College is an institution that prides itself on pluralism, both religiously and educationally, and you're going to see, I think, a lot of that come across tonight in the way that Sandy is really open to thinking about Jewish education through the lens of innovation and change and taking risks. So I want to say a word about Sandy. Sandy hails now from Wichita, Kansas, and she's a Jewish educator there and has really been focusing on her studies over the last couple of years. So we've been lucky to have her practically full-time. And I'm sure she can say another word about her work and her passions, and that will come through also in her presentation. The presentation is of her master's thesis. And it was the product of a year-long process that began last September. And last September, Sandy came with a kernel of an idea. We turned that into a research question. She worked hard researching the literature, finding respondents, collecting data, analyzing that data, and writing a really remarkable thesis, which won distinction at graduation. So Sandy's going to give you a very short version of her thesis, and I'm sure she'd be happy to share more with anyone who would still like to know more. Just wanted to give you an overview of how we're going to run this webinar. Sandy's going to speak for about 15 minutes. After that, our Dean Michael Shire will hop in with a response and some context and to kick off the Q&A. And then we'll have about 20-25 minutes for Q&A from the crowd, and we'll look really forward to your questions. Just so everyone knows, a few technical notes. If you could put your microphones on mute, that would be really helpful in terms of the sound quality. And you'll see that there's a spot where you can actually raise your hand. There's a little, of course, you're always welcome to raise your hand if you can find your camera. I was struggling. But there's also a spot where you can digitally raise your hand. So if you have a question during the Q&A, we'll be very excited to hear from you then. So Sandy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. What a nice introduction, and what wonderful people that I've met online working at Hebrew College, and it's really been a pleasure, and lots of hard work, and I learned a tremendous amount. I've been working on my master's for a few years, and I thought, okay, I'm at the end, I don't have any more to learn, I'm good, and oh my gosh, I was so wrong. I learned a tremendous amount from Hebrew College, and thanks to Deborah and Michael and all my teachers, so thank you. I'll say that first. Let's get started. Okay, so welcome everybody too. Thank you for participating and for your interest in my work. I put a lot of work into it. It is a passion of mine, and I'm excited to share it with all of you. So after having launched 2 Saturday Shabbat schools in my career, I decided to focus my research on the question, what are the educational gains and educational trade-offs of a Saturday Shabbat school program? What I wanted to do is start by sharing with you a little vignette. One of the educators I interviewed really touched me with a story because I think it illustrates and captures the essence and true spirit of what a Saturday Shabbat school community is all about. So I'd like to give you a little story in her words. For the first 30 minutes of services, our entire school is in the main sanctuary, davening with the larger community. Then a really beautiful thing happens. When the rabbi is ready to dismiss the kids to go back to class, she'll say, please wish someone a good Shabbos. Someone, if you don't know them, or just to say hello. The kids, as they're walking out to go back into their classrooms, go up and they'll shake everyone's hands and say, good Shabbos, hello. Older members in the community are delighted to see those cute little faces coming, shaking their hands and saying hello. They like saying hi to the new people and to the people that they see every week. It's very cute. It's also a great community thing because it teaches them to be friendly and to be nice, and it's really just a great moment. It doesn't take very much time. They're leaving the sanctuary anyway, so it's a lovely transition. So now with this image in mind, I want to draw us back to the mid-19th century. In 1838, Rebecca Gratz founded the first Jewish Sunday school in Philadelphia. It was modeled after the Christian Sunday schools in an attempt to fit in and to counter the evangelicals trying to convert Jews to Christianity. Fast forward to the 1950s and 1960s America, where there is a sharp spike in synagogue affiliation. Sundays were reserved for church and religion. Jews fit in with mainstream society by also having their children attend Sunday school. Of course, for Christians, it makes sense to have children in Sunday school. It's their Sabbath day. In 1990, the National Jewish Population Study comes out. The most noteworthy finding of this study, at least for my purposes, is that all forms of Jewish education are associated with lower rates of intermarriage and enhancing Jewish identity down the road, with the exception of Sunday school. While there are, of course, exceptional Sunday schools, the overall picture wasn't good. At the same time this significant and alarming piece of information surfaces, we also see the landscape of American life changing dramatically. Most stores are now open for business on Sundays. Sports practices and tournaments are held on Sundays. Saturdays and Sundays are equally filled with activities. The American schedule has changed because the focus on religion has changed. Sundays are no longer days of religion only. America has become less Christian, and Jews have become more American. American Jews are more organically part of the fabric of the country today, no longer needing to try to fit in as much as they had in the past. Jews are more comfortable being Jewish. So the combination of the changing American culture, the changing nature of Sundays, and the lack of impact of the Jewish supplementary Sunday school calls for asking the question, what about Saturdays, our Shabbat, our Sabbath? The need to reinvigorate Shabbat is clear as we see more and more empty synagogues on Shabbat. Quoting an educator from my study, she says, everyone has a certain amount of Jewish time we want people to expend and do it on Jewish time. Shabbat is our Jewish time. Sunday morning isn't. And so with these factors in mind, particularly the negative finding of Jewish Sunday schools, new research in Jewish education emerges, focusing on what a successful supplementary school looks like. Three elements that I saw appear repeatedly in the studies are community, experiential learning, and parent involvement. Community can be seen when the synagogue and school are symbiotic. Parents, community members, and children learn and participate together. Experiential learning is seen when Jewish education is experienced in order to feel relevant. Participation and immersion are vital. Parent involvement is seen when parents are not just dropping their children off. They're participating in their children's education, acting as role models, and there is parent buy-in. Shabbat school programming, as I will argue, has elements of all three, and therefore can emerge as one successful avenue of Jewish education. I use both quantitative and qualitative methods to answer my research questions, securing 22 educators who have, or at one time had, Shabbat school programming in place. I reached out to the Reconstructionist, Reform, and Conservative movements, as well as friends on Facebook, Hebrew College cohorts on Schoology, and contacting those schools written up in the aforementioned studies. Out of that pool of 22 educators, 18 educators responded to the survey I created on SurveyMonkey. I asked questions to determine if the elements of community, experiential learning, and parent involvement impacted the educational outcomes, as well as ask them about the educational gains they found and any educational trade-offs and how that impacted the learning. The questions relating to community mostly centered on the Kiddush lunch, if the school offered one, because of the prevalence in the literature indicating it contributes to a positive feeling of community. What I found was that it did, and that the Kiddush lunch also adds a positive feeling about Shabbat, helping to cement intergenerational friendships as well as friendships between families and children. I found that parent involvement and parent participation noticeably increased on Shabbat over Sundays. To determine if attendance was a trade-off for Saturdays, I compared Saturday and Sunday attendance. I learned that Saturday attendance is better than or similar to Sunday morning attendance. Sporting events, practices, and other activities are now the norm on both Saturdays and Sundays. 50% of the educators reported no learning losses from following traditional Shabbat halacha. The other 50%, although reporting some losses, compensate for those losses and thus felt there were no trade-offs because of it. Compensation included an added day during the week and being creative with the learning. Questions to determine the educational gains show significant increases in Shabbat and Torah knowledge, prayer competency, and a deeper appreciation of community. The qualitative element of my research came from a group of 8 educators who agreed to be interviewed. Here again, I asked questions specifically related to the educational gains and trade-offs, as well as community parent involvement and experiential learning. The trade-offs mentioned in the interviews, like in the survey, were, for the most part, also dismissed with ways they were compensated for. Primarily mentioned were related to attendance, as far as absences due to sports and extracurriculars. However, they stated that attendance was no different than Sundays, as I mentioned before. Also mentioned as a trade-off was Shabbat dress, in terms of students showing up in soccer and sports uniforms. However, the educators and the communities are very accommodating and accepting of this. Teacher preparedness was reported as a trade-off because it was more intensive for the staff, especially if the school follows Shabbat halakha, in which case the teachers need to plan ahead. For instance, no last-minute photocopying, et cetera. Hebrew competency could be seen as a trade-off, noted mostly because of halakhic restrictions of no writing. However, an additional weekday of Hebrew compensates for this, they said. Shabbat halakhic restrictions were mentioned as a trade-off, but most overcame any challenges presented, and compensations are being made to counter any trade-off effects. The educational gains that emerged naturally fell into 2 categories. First were directly related to tangible learning outcomes. So the comfort level and ability with learning and leading services increased significantly and was seen as very positive across the board. Learning Torah happens more organically. Shabbat School provides the opportunity to dig deeper into studying Torah and the Parsha of the week. And the essence of the uniqueness and specialness of Shabbat materializes. Overall, however, the educators wanted to delve deeper into and kept coming back to the aspects of community, experiential learning by doing Shabbat, and parent involvement that are all built into their Saturday Shabbat School programs. These are seen by them as educational gains and are the second aspect of the educational gains reported. The educators talked about how their kiddush lunches help foster community. It's an opportunity for students across all grade levels to create their own community sometimes, and for families to sit and talk to each other rather than just running off. They also spoke of adult education as a community-building opportunity. The Sunday drop-off issue changed for most schools, and parent involvement increased as parents started attending Shabbat services, socializing with other parents, and attending programs geared towards them, such as the Starbucks Shabbat, created by one of the educators. A majority of Jewish children are not experiencing Shabbat in their homes. This is reality. The educators all noted that their students are, however, experiencing Shabbat together with their community, with the experiential learning component present in their Shabbat school learning environment. They're going to and participating in a Shabbat service on Shabbat, eating challah and saying the motzi, drinking juice and saying kiddush together on Shabbat. As stated by one of the educators, they're not pretending it's Shabbat, it actually is Shabbat. In Sunday school, on the other hand, if the students do not also come on Shabbat, they are essentially learning about Shabbat in a vacuum. Numerous metaphors were imparted to me about how the Shabbat school program works perfectly as an experiential learning opportunity. Here is one great example. You can explain to a child how to swim, but unless they get in the water and go through the mechanics, they never learn how to swim. You can explain to a child how to do a Torah service, how to daven a musaf, how to walk around with the Torah. But unless they do it, they don't really internalize it, they don't really get it. My children get it because we do it. In conclusion, what emerged is a very nice synthesis of the survey results with the information gleaned from the interviews. Overall, the educational gains seen far outweighed any educational trade-offs in a Saturday Shabbat school program. The educational trade-offs, or challenges as they were noted, did not appear critical and seemed to be well compensated for where they did exist. The halakhic Shabbat restrictions turned out not to be educational trade-offs and did not impact the learning outcomes as I thought they might. Attendance on Saturdays was also not a trade-off compared to Sundays, as I had also thought. The tangible educational gains did stand out significantly, but is not what the educators wanted to mostly focus on in the survey and in the interviews. The positive learning outcomes achieved by students attending a Saturday Shabbat school are influenced mostly by being part of a community, having parent participation, and experiencing Shabbat together. Through this research, I have concluded that a Saturday Shabbat school program can be successfully implemented if those key elements are present. This occurs mostly in an organic manner and is a built-in advantage of having a school program on Shabbat. I am hopeful that this research will contribute to the field of Jewish education by showing that implementation of a Saturday Shabbat school can serve as one successful model for future Jewish education initiatives. I can think of no better future for the Jewish community than having children participate and engage in celebrating Shabbat together in real time as we have done for thousands of years. Thank you.
Nicely done. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Thanks, Deborah.
Michael, I'm going to turn it to you.
Lovely. Well, good evening, everyone, and I'm delighted to follow on from that wonderful presentation. Sandy did a remarkable piece of work in really thinking about a very important but very finely focused research question. And she did some important work in both assessing the field, what has been the background to her thinking about this work, and then going out there into the community and doing the research, the empirical data collection, to really be able to have some real findings about the work that was going on. I mean, I know it seems to me it was quite surprising at how many of these projects were happening around the country, and particularly in the conservative movement, which I think was perhaps surprising to me that would be the case. I want to put some of Sandy's work into context, into the larger context of Jewish education, and then kind of drill down into a couple of the technical details about Saturday schools, or whatever the appropriate name is going to be for them. I think in the 21st century world in which we live, we are all struggling to think about the future of the Sunday congregational school, and I include midweek in that as well. And there has been many attempts to think about what it is that is successful and appropriate about part-time Jewish education. Recently, there was an online discussion at one of the major educational Facebook groups whether it is a broken model and needs to be repaired. Personally, I don't take that view. I think rather that we have a certain approach to the time that we spend with children, and that has often been termed, and the word that we use for that is schooling. And that schooling model is, as Sandy indicated, comes indeed from the early work of Rebecca Gratz in the 19th century, where a model of the Christian Sunday school was adopted by the Jewish community. And that's why we have what was at one point called Sunday school, Jewish Sunday school, or Hebrew school as it came to be known. So the model for that is schooling. Now, schooling, when you think about it, it entails classrooms, blackboards, in those days certainly, teachers, children in rows, textbooks, curriculum, all the things that go with curriculum, measurement, evaluation, and assessment. One of the challenges to that model came in the 1990s with the work of Issa Aaron, a colleague of ours in California, who wrote that perhaps the model of schooling should be considered alongside another model, a model of what she called religious enculturation. The idea that we want to bring people into a culture, not just children. Unlike schooling, enculturation is for everyone. It is for young and for old, and in fact, it's intergenerational. It's about bringing people into a culture, whether this is people who have never been inside that culture before, or people who are visiting that culture for a while. Think of the family holiday. We may go to a foreign country for a few weeks. We will learn a foreign language. We will eat foreign food. We will enjoy the sights and the sounds and the culture of a different place. So when we think of enculturation, we think of a different model from the one of schooling. As we all begin to think about what the future of religious schooling could be all about for the Jewish community, the part-time sector, perhaps we need to think also not about just changing the day, but also what we're offering. And I think what Sandy is offering us is an opportunity to think about enculturation as well as a change of day. So to me, it's not just about whether it's Sunday or Saturday, although we'll come to the technical details about that in a minute, but it's also about a change of paradigm. The change from a schooling model, which has become very prevalent on Sunday or even Tuesday and Thursday, to a model that is much more intergenerational, much more dependent on the culture of the ritual that is happening at that particular moment. And Sandy mentioned Kiddush and the service and the opportunities for the liturgy to be present in the lives of children and parents. And that's not surprising that her results found that more parents were involved and more children were participating in the rituals of the Shabbat day. So I want us to think about how enculturation can be a component of this framework that Sandy is giving us. And of course, linking that to experiential education, that's kind of a very 21st century term, but enculturation perhaps is a framework within which experiential education operates. I suppose I'm warning against congregations who are taking the schooling model and bringing it from Sunday to Saturday and having the children sit in classrooms with blackboards or iPads, if that's possible on Shabbat, and with teachers and curriculum and textbooks. If that's what they're doing, then they're just replicating the same model, and they're not taking the advantage of what enculturation or experiential education can do on the Shabbat day. So that's kind of the framework, the bigger question. To go into some smaller details, and particularly this issue of halachic restrictions on Shabbat. As Deb said earlier, Hebrew College is committed to the pluralist environment and the pluralist approach to education. And as Sandy indicated, the conservative synagogue, who perhaps would find the halachic domain more compelling than others of the denomination she researched, have shown that there can be ways in which Jews can operate in an experimental learning environment without the need for, if that's a limitation, writing or coloring or the use of electronic materials. And I think it's exciting for us. It's a great challenge for us to find an environment on Shabbat where there are restrictions, perhaps, where we can find other ways of working with children. And certainly in my work of the spiritual development of children, of all the pedagogies and the methodologies that I use for teaching, let's say, godly play, which is one of the spiritual methodologies we are developing at Hebrew College, it doesn't require any halachic restrictions. There are no things within it that a conservative congregation or even an Orthodox congregation could not do, especially if the materials were already on the premises and you didn't need to carry them in. So let's be creative. Let's find those ways that would allow children to be singing, to be worshiping and praying and being creative and thinking without the need for writing materials, for textbooks, for the traditional schooling model. I suppose I'll finish with two anecdotes and let people, in a sense, bring their own stories to this discussion as you have an opportunity to ask questions and think about this with Sandy and with all of us. The first one is a synagogue that I was involved with where a group of parents felt that their children were not getting enough on the Sunday morning and that they wanted to shift to a Saturday morning program where they could all be involved as families. But it was only for one grade and it was only one group of people. And the synagogue, in fact, reluctantly agreed to this. And they said to the group of parents, if you want to do this, you will have to pay for your own teacher to come in and teach your children on an alternative day from when we normally have Sunday school. And the parents were prepared to do that, and they found someone wonderful to work with them, more like a chavurah, really, because it became a group of parents and children who were working together over a number of Saturdays over the whole year, and in which a wonderful chavurah experience was created. Those parents, over the years in which their children chose to be in the Saturday program, became more and more involved in the leadership of the synagogue until eventually those group of parents were on the board of trustees of the synagogue and were running the operation of the synagogue as a whole, even once their children had left and gone on to university. So the commitment of parents to make this choice for themselves and to be participating in a Shabbat experience was very positive in that case. What was also interesting about that was the synagogue didn't shift its school from Sunday to Saturday, but it just allowed a group of parents to do that. And I suppose that's a possibility too. Maybe we can have both. If parents want to continue on Sunday, and I know there's competition with sports and other activities on Shabbat for some parents, and if they're not going to come on Saturday anyway, then perhaps we need to have something for Sunday parents and something for Shabbat parents who might want that value-added experience. The second anecdote is an amusing one, is that I was serving as a rabbi and education director at a synagogue, and it was a Reform synagogue that had a typical Shabbat morning experience, which was a bar mitzvah service in the main sanctuary, and then something very small, a minyan, in the alternative chapel for those people who, mainly elderly people who wanted to come and have a short prayer service on Shabbat morning and didn't want to be in the bar mitzvah experience. When I came into that synagogue, I decided I would try an experiment, which was to see if we could build up the alternative Shabbat morning congregation and provide an alternative for the bar mitzvah service, but with more people and with more intergenerational activity. And so I invited young parents, families of children, particularly babies and young children, to come to this alternative service, even if they had nothing to do with the bar mitzvah. And the first response I got from young parents was, will you be providing babysitting? And I automatically said, no, we are not going to have babysitting. Your children will be with you in this family-friendly service. We will provide opportunities for your children to crawl around, to walk around, to dance and sing when we sing, and we will have a table at the back of the shul, and on that table there will be books to read, there'll be materials to look at, there'll be felt to play with, there'll be things to put together, things to take apart, quiet things that children can do as part of the Shabbat morning service. When they want to be over the table, they can be there. When they want to be with their parents and their grandparents, they can be there. We built that small minyan from just a few dozen people to 60 to 70 and then to 100 and 150 people over a year's period. And it became one of the most important parts of the Shabbat morning experience at the synagogue, and at one point was even overtaking the numbers in the bar mitzvah service. So we demonstrated that enculturation, community involvement, intergenerational educational activities do not have to be restricted to some part other than the Shabbat morning that can be incorporated into it. So Sandy, thank you for all you've done to make us think about this. I certainly would like to hear from other people about their experience with this experiment and ways in which they would like to make it work. and questions they may have about how it can work or whether they have seen problems with it in the past. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Barbara Simons, I saw you had a hand up. I'm not sure if it was raised on purpose or by a click gone awry, but please speak up if you have a question. We'd love to hear from you. Okay. I think we can't hear Barbara right now. Perhaps she doesn't have a question, but we'll leave it open. Maybe she'll come back to us. Are there any other questions from our audience here? Alan, please. You seem to be on mute. There we go. Alan, we can hear you now.
You can hear me? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So Sandy, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. I actually had a question for you. I was wondering if you could just touch on the way the day is structured when a synagogue implements a Saturday school program. Is it, in other words, is it split like half-time between services and I don't know if you'd call it class time, but outside of service time, or is it is there more of a focus on the service time than there might have been if it was an otherwise kind of alternate model or a Sunday model instead?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Alan. Nice to hear you. Thanks for joining. So I didn't really focus on that aspect of hearing about how their day went, but sort of naturally, many of the educators told me about how their day was structured, like you're asking. So for the most part, well, across the board, all the children were involved in a service, in a Shabbat morning service, either through a junior congregation, through their own type of service that they were leading, or with the whole service, with the general service. So they were part of either the Shabbat community of the congregation, or they had a junior congregation. If there was a junior congregation, it seemed like it would be in the larger congregations where they have that option, and the parents were invited to join into that particular service. The other part of the time was spent in the classrooms with the teachers, so there was learning going on, and either there was a snack, an oneg, or the kiddush lunch afterwards that I mentioned, and all of those helped create the sense of community. For the kiddush, or for the oneg that was just for the school specific, that created that school community across the grade levels, and otherwise the children were invited to a kiddush lunch. Yeah, did that answer your question?
It does, yeah, thank you very much. And in fact, I think one of the interesting things about this particular model is, in addition to it being very beneficial sounding for the students, it sounds like it really helps build community, particularly like you said, for kiddush, or when the students are in the main service, or the parents get invited into the student service, anything like that. It really sounds like it's got a lot of benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to refer also to what what Rabbi Shire was saying about putting away the electricity, putting away the writing, and the traditional school model that we think of when we think of Sunday school, or even Saturday Shabbat school. So one of the educators that I interviewed mentioned that, or one of the educators wrote that it was so nice to not worry about writing or drawing or anything like that, because it promoted class discussion, and you could really talk and get into some great discussion. So for those schools that have the halakhic restrictions, that was one way of learning. And even for those that didn't have the halakhic restrictions, they were doing more of that group discussion, even with the Torah portion and Parsha of the week. So, thank you.
That's great. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Barbara, I see you raising your hand again. Let's take two. She has a burning question, but can't seem to ask it. So we'll have to find another way for Barbara and Sandy to connect. We have just a couple more minutes if there are any other questions. Eileen, Harvey, I heard you talking about your synagogues. Curious to hear, what drove you to join tonight. Is this something that you're thinking about in your congregation? Something you've been toying with, debating about, or just drawn to it?
Is it okay if I talk? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So a couple of things I wanted to comment and ask about. One that intrigued me is we have a couple of rabbis at our synagogue, one of whom has brought up the idea of Saturday school in the past, and we've always kind of felt a little bit challenged by the dilemma in our community is that the majority of the youth sports for the kids happens to be on Saturday morning. And so the question is, we actually have good attendance on Sundays and would not be doing something like this to fix an existing problem, but the question would be, whether it would be worth it. So my question, one question I had is, are you aware, perhaps Sandy or anyone else, of any synagogues that have done this as kind of like a once-a-month option, like having school on Sundays 3 out of 4 times and then pre-scheduled on the calendar that, say, the first Shabbat of the month would be Shabbat school, so that it's sort of like some sort of a hybrid model, I guess?
Yes.
And so I guess that would be my first question. And then the other thing is whether or not you had to make any other teacher arrangements. Like I have teachers, for instance, that would not be able to teach on Shabbat, and it would require, either letting teachers go or changing staffing or things like that. So I didn't know whether that's anything that people ran into. And then the other piece is just strictly on the basis of hours that teachers crave to teach just all the other topics that they want to teach. It does lead to an actual hours of class, class time or any kind of student contact time. And how, I understand what you're saying about the pros and cons, but I think there are certain realities of what do you then not teach when you got your time. That's a bunch of questions on the table. Feel free to address any or all of them.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Deborah, should I just go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay, so yes, there are a couple of the schools that I talked to were not exclusively Saturday Shabbat school programs. They had, some did once a month programs. So yes, it is possible to do, keep the 3 Sundays and then do once a month to celebrate Shabbat or something like that. And then maybe you don't have Sunday, school on that Sunday. So that is definitely an option. Some of the larger congregations I talked to who had more funding and larger numbers and the resources to do so were able to offer options of either a Saturday or a Sunday program. So that was another type of school that I ran into, another programming. And then one final thing, you mentioned about the sports. A lot of your kids do have sports. There was one, actually 2 schools that I talked to where there were concerns brought up when they changed over to a Saturday school, completely changed over to a Saturday school. And one of the problems was with, scheduling the, gymnastics and all that. The problem that they ran into the first year, and they had to make some accommodations, was not giving the schedule in advance. They said that if any school was looking to implement a Saturday Shabbat school, to let parents know in the winter to spring before, because that's when they start planning the practices for their kids. Now, that's not true in all cases. I know there's soccer practices that are Saturdays or whatever. So yes, that can be, that definitely is an issue. But a lot of the schools that I talked to or that were on the survey indicated that there were Saturday and Sunday practices, and so, they're seeing both days having absences, especially with travel. So that was the one answer or the one thing that I can pass along to you about that. The second one is about teachers. I had one school said that their teachers were fighting to be the ones that taught on Shabbat. So for whatever, whatever that is. But yes, I can understand if a teacher can't teach on a Saturday, that could be problematic. It might open it up to others in the community, even some retirees that may not have previously thought about teaching, but have the time on Saturdays to do so. That might be a good opportunity. So that's one, possible. And then third, you were saying the third was making up the work, that there's a tremendous amount of work, and so really the answer to that is the additional day during the week of Hebrew school. So needing one extra day during the week, not just for Hebrew school, but for the entire class would meet maybe on Wednesdays once a week. So that's another possibility. I'm not sure if that will work for your school or whatever, but have I answered your questions, Eileen, or I don't know if you have any further questions.
Eileen might be muted.
So anyway, thank you. Great.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions, Eileen, and for bringing it to the field. I have a couple more questions, but I do want to hold to our end time. So I'm going to ask that Harvey, if you can stay on, anybody else who's here, please stay with us. But I also want to give permission, of course, for those who had scheduled till 9:15.
They're running out of bandwidth.
To go ahead and log off. And so sorry, everybody, I was losing this video. Are you able to see and hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, now.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. Great. Okay, I'm back. The rainbow wheel of death, as I like to call it, was spinning on my computer. But so thank you so much to Sandy. Again, if people would like to stay on, we'd love to have you. If there's anything further that you'd like to know, I'm sure Sandy would. In addition to hanging on for a few minutes, also happy to receive your emails through us or directly. If you have any questions about Hebrew College, about the program that Sandy was in while she was doing this work, that is part of my portfolio, and I'd love to speak with you about it further. And again, thank you so much for being here for this inaugural webinar. We look forward to feedback and topics.
Deb may have frozen, but I hope that everyone can hear me, and make sure that we, at the end of this very exciting first opportunity, to say that we are currently targeting recruits for our Fellows program, which is a substantial tuition discount for the Masters in Jewish Education that you do have to enroll by September, and before September, indeed, you have to start working now with us to get enrolled for September, and if that was the case, you would find yourself in an excellent program with a great tuition package. So we look forward to calling you for that opportunity. Do let us know if you'd like to know more about the Masters in Jewish Education with its 3 tracks: experiential education, special needs, and early childhood at Hebrew College, online, available to you from your home anytime, day and night, through our learning platform, Schoology, and our award-winning, interactive, very comfortable and intimate learning environment. So thank you again to everyone. I don't know if Deb can come back.
Can you hear me? I'm back. I just turned off my video so that hopefully people could at least hear me. Thank you, Michael, for stepping in. And for anybody who wants to stay on, I know Harvey had a question still. So thanks everyone for coming. Feel free to log off. But if you'd like to have a few more minutes of conversation with Sandy, feel free to stay on with us. Harvey, go ahead.
Yeah. I really thank you for this research. I find it fascinating and confirming of a lot of the things that we've been trying to do here in Austin. We've had primarily a hybrid type of program, and I wondered whether in your research you ran into the following feedback from the congregation. When we initially we had different times for Shabbat programs in order to make them more personal, small, and that if giving 2 days, for example, if a second grader had their Shabbat, let's say 1st through 3rd had their Shabbat program 1 week, and the 4th through 7th had their Shabbat program another week, we received feedback from significant numbers of families that they were not prepared to give 2 days to Jewish time. I'm not trying to be facetious here. It's simply what they said. Did you find any pushback from people who said that in your research that there was only so much time parents and families were prepared to give to, quote, Jewish time?
Yes, Harvey, thanks so much for asking. I think that's a great question, and it came up a few different times for sure. And it is that Jewish time that parents are willing to give, and usually it is 1 day a week. You know, older if they have to come 2 days a week. So it was felt pretty much across the board from those that brought up this idea of Jewish time that because they were bringing their children on Sundays, that's the main reason that we're not seeing the children coming on Saturdays, unless it's a requirement, and usually it's a requirement pre-bar bat mitzvah in many synagogues. That makes the synagogues more empty on Shabbat. So the thought is that if we're asking time of the parents, let's forget about Sundays and have them come on Saturdays on Shabbat and experience that together with their community. And that they felt, those educators that expressed that felt that that was more important to bring them together on Saturdays. And of course, you know, there's times when parents can't come every week. So, you know, just like, you know, you weren't finding kids that came every Sunday. So that came up as well. So am I kind of on topic?
Yeah, more or less. Of course, all Jewish education is local, and here in Austin, almost all sports are Saturday-based. But the point was well taken. Given enough notice, parents will make a commitment and rearrange their schedules. So I think it's doable. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. And there are ways to mix it up a little bit. For those that have, you know, I don't know if it's, you know, I'm not sure what you have in Austin, but, you know, soccer practice in the fall or football practice on Saturdays, you know, maybe have a Havdalah in the afternoon once a month, and, you know, to morning Shabbat, maybe a Friday night. So there are ways to mix it up a little bit. And then again, flexibility as far as attendance, you know, how many are there required days that they're required to be there, how flexible are you, that sort of thing. So those are some other options, maybe.
Right. I mean, for me, and this is, was that as comfortable as today in America, when it speaking to a sport about having Saturday morning because holiday be an child not being there on a particular day. Our parents had a great deal of trouble speaking to that non-Jewish coach, and I found that interesting. It's just it's a course. It's as a hybrid.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't hear all of what you said. It was a little choppy. I'm sorry, but I think I got the gist of it. It is.
Yeah, I mean, our parents found it difficult to speak to the non-Jewish leader, whether it's a coach or some other leader, to ask for a religious, for their child not to be penalized for missing a particular. They had difficult. And
that's interesting. Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, when we made that suggestion, the response was, well, I don't know if I can do that. So it was, but overall, for the kids who came and the parents who came, it has been a very successful program.
Yeah, great. A very interesting little what you've experienced. Thank you for sharing that.
Now that we have Wichita represented, Ohio, Texas, Kansas, obviously, and Massachusetts here. So we have a good cross-section in terms of regions. Again, Sandy, I'm just going to thank you so much for your incredibly hard work on this project, the passion that you brought to it, and thanks everyone. Most people actually stayed on past our official end time, so I think that's indicative of the interest in your subject. If anyone wants to get in touch with Sandy or with us, if you have any questions about the presentation, about our work, we would love to hear from you. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.